We're going to actually turn our attention back to the Leafs now to just quickly discuss the run of form that they've been on. We talked about how good Matthews has been recently, and similar to how good Matthews has been, the Leafs have been just as good. There was a little bit of a dark spot after the Florida game, but in general, they went on a huge run. They beat some massive teams. They beat Boston, they beat Tampa, and they got a point against Florida. All things considered, you take that 5 out of 6. What did you think, or what have you thought of their last week and a half, let's say, of games?
I think the Leafs have shown over the last week and a half that they are legit. And I will admit, I went on TikTok after the Florida game, and I was pretty upset talking about the Leafs showing that they aren't able to hold a 5-1 lead. But when I got a little less frustrated and reflected on it a bit, that team had been through a crazy stretch of games. As you mentioned, they were 2-0 in 2 dominating victories against 2 Atlantic teams who are playing in incredible form, quite possibly 2 of the best teams in the league in Tampa and Boston. Toronto not only beat them, they dominated them when it mattered the most. And they were playing Florida in Florida on a back-to-back after just playing Tampa Bay. The fact that they got a point out of it shows that this team can do it.
Yeah, all things considered, take the blown lead away. You take 3 out of 4 on that road trip back-to-back all day.
100%.
That's why. Is it possible for me to be very upset about that game, but still pleased with sort of how they've been playing? Like, I'm not that upset. I'm upset about the game in a vacuum, but I'm not upset at the team as a whole because they've been great and they got some huge wins.
Yeah, one positive thing we can take away from that game is that this Leafs core has been known to melt down when it matters most. And yes, they did it against Florida again. But for the first time that I have ever seen, when they melted down, they came back, right? They were losing at one point.
They were,
and then they scored to tie it. They forced it to overtime. Sure, they lost in overtime. But if there is one beacon of hope that comes with that meltdown, it's the fact that this Leaf team looks like they're making progress. In the past, when they melted down against Boston, when everything hit the fan, it got worse and worse and worse. But something about this team allowed them to collect their emotions and mount a comeback and get a point.
Yeah, I just hate that we've even seen this before when they go down early in the game. My only criticism of the Leafs sometimes is that they need to be woken up. When you can see the danger coming as a fan, you knew almost as soon as that Gudas goal went in, that howler from Shalgren, he let in that crappy goal. What are you going to do? It happens. But as soon as that goal went in, we were watching the game together. I kind of was like, oh boy, this might be going down a bad path. But it just bothers me that they need to be losing 6-5 to then have the impetus to go score. And I know game momentum is a huge part of the game, and sometimes there's only so much you can do, but it happens a lot of the time where it's not just a one-off. It's almost a trend with them where they have to they're starting really poorly in the first and they have to go down 2 goals to then come out in the second and score 3.
Yeah.
But can you not just play good from the start? Because in the playoffs, teams are going to tighten up. If you play a Boston, a Tampa, if you go down 2 against those teams, it's going to be really tough to come back. And that's what matters.
Yeah, it will be very tough to come back. But like we said, maybe that Florida game, after the game, Sheldon Keefe goes in that dressing room, keep things positive and says, you know what, that was a meltdown. But if there's one thing you take away from this game, it's the fact that you can come back when stuff hits the fan. This team has the grit and the heart that when things get bad, you have the ability to pull yourself out of a hole and make a game, and that's what they did. So maybe if they go down 2-0, Sheldon Keefe calls a timeout, which I think he should have called after that Gudas goal. They call a timeout. He calls them to reflect on this game and says, look what you guys did against the best team in the league. Let's go do it again, and maybe that helps them.
Yeah, I think Sheldon Keefe handled it really well in the media because he can get snappy and he can get upset, but I think he made the right call to just calm the waters. And I think the media and Toronto fan base followed suit because usually when we blow a lead like that, there's a lot of sort of negative tension, I would say, in the media, on the radio, on Twitter. But I think a lot of the Leafs fan base was just sort of like, okay, it happened. Let's just move on. And I think there's 2 reasons for that. I think, well, one main reason I'll say, and that's because people realize this is a really good team, like we just talked about, and also regular season doesn't mean anything for these guys.
Not anymore for this franchise.
Exactly. So I think the fans are just sort of done stressing about regular season and they're saving their energy for the playoffs because that's all that matters. So maybe that also played a role. But I think all things considered, the Florida game was a tough one, but you just move on.
Yeah, well, speaking of stress, as you mentioned, there might be one previous second-line winger on the Toronto Maple Leafs that might be stressing out a bit. Goes by the name of William Nylander, who was recently demoted to the third line, playing with Kampf and Engvall, I believe. Mikheyev got brought up to the second line, and they're shuffling with Mikheyev and Kerfoot there. Actually, they both play on that line.
Play there, yeah.
Yeah, they both play on that line. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. I keep always thinking that Mitch and Tavares play together. I don't know why. I love that duo. But anyways, here's my question to you. What have you seen from Willie being on the third line? Do you like it? Should it stay? Should it be permanent? I don't know. Give me your thoughts.
Well, honestly, I think come playoff time, he's back with Johnny after a couple of games, but I think it's been good for him to be on that line because he was so bad for a 2-month stretch even. If it was that long, it seemed like. And it seemed he just needed to be woken up. He scored a couple of goals. He scored a nice goal against Dallas the other day.
Beautiful one.
And Mikheyev's looked good on the second line too. So I think for the time being, it's fine. I just hate that Willie, similar to what I said a few minutes ago with the Leafs needing to be woken up. I hate that he needs to be woken up. I love Willie, but you're a professional hockey player. Just play hard every night. And he just seems he seemed lazy. I don't think that's a fair criticism of his overall game because I think when he wants to play, he's fantastic, but he's been lazy. And that's the part of his game that I wish he just grew out of because he's 25, 26 now. You're not a kid anymore.
Yeah, so when we look at William Nylander's play throughout the entire first half of the year when he was scoring at a great pace and everyone was saying he was having a great game, I kept talking about this, that William Nylander, if he does not score or put up a point, he is invisible. William Nylander, for anyone who watches Toronto sports hockey, William Nylander does not skate back. William Nylander does not get gritty in the corners. William Nylander does not finish checks. William Nylander does not look like that very gritty player who can have a great game being off of the score sheet. And you know what? Fine. Not all players are built that way.
No.
However, when you don't start scoring, things need to change. And during that first half of the season when Willie was putting up a lot of points, I was always saying it looks like that his ability to score right now is kind of masking his poor abilities away from the puck. And that's always been a criticism of Willie. Away from the puck, he's bad.
But sometimes he can turn it on and he can
weirdly
get into the corners. I just don't understand why that's not part of his game more because it will probably help him to score.
For sure.
Those things go hand in hand. I'm hoping that maybe come playoff time he can flip a switch because last playoffs he was unreal. I don't know. I'm just hoping because if he's rolling, Matthews and Marner are rolling, Tavares is just being Tavares, always steady. This team is dangerous. A lot sort of hinges on him because you want to have those 2 to 3 pure goal threats, and if he's not on, it makes him easier to mark. I think.
So you talk about Willie having the ability to turn it on, and what I will say about him being demoted to the third line is I think that was a bit of a wake-up call because what I noticed in that Philly, Boston, and Tampa game, and especially in the Dallas game, he looked like a player that was getting in the corners. His ability to work the cycle in that Dallas game blew my mind. Him, Engvall, and Kampf had about 4 or 5 shifts in that second period that were spent about 90% in the offensive zone. And they didn't score on those shifts. Willie scored, I think, in the first period. But Willie looked like that player who was getting in there. There's a lot to be said about noticing a player. Willie was very noticeable in that Dallas game. And I think that demotion to the third line woke him up. He has 3 goals and 2 assists since being put on that third line. He looks like he's playing with a spark. He was invisible on that second line for the longest time. I agree with you. A player being paid $7 million will not be on the third line come playoff time, but who knows? Maybe he finds something in his game in this third line and he brings it with him back on that second in the playoffs.
And even if it's not broken, if things are working out, who cares if you make $7 million? If it's working in the playoffs, I don't care what money you make. If you're helping the team in whatever capacity, you stay there. But that's the thing. You said he turned it on against Dallas, which he did. That just bothers me that he picks his games almost. And I'm the biggest Willie fan you'll find, but it is frustrating. I can only defend him so much, I guess.
That's been Willie his whole career. And you know what? We'll say it. That was Austin and Mitch for the first couple of years of their career too. But they look like they've grown and matured, and they don't miss games anymore.
No.
The one thing I will say about Austin too is when Austin doesn't score or get an assist, which seems like never, he is very noticeable. And the defensive end, he's great. He puts up 8-9 shots that are very high danger shots. They just don't go in. Austin Matthews never misses a game. He never goes invisible.
That whole line doesn't.
Right?
Even Marner, like you mentioned Marner. He's always doing the things that he does. Bunting is always making noise too. Like I said, if Willie can turn it on and Johnny can find a little bit of a scoring touch come playoff time, this team's going to be so tough to beat. I just really hope all the things come together, because this feels like, I don't know if we said this for 3 years now, but it feels like they have a shot this year.
Yeah. So as we talk about these superstars on the Leafs, there's a lot of talk on Twitter really quickly that one of the big four will be moved in the offseason. I don't know why this is being talked about.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Why it is, but we'll touch on it really quickly for the sake of getting our followers in touch with the news. Who do you think, if one of the big four was moved, the big four being Mitch, Austin, Johnny, and Willie, who do you think it should be, and who do you think it will be?
I just don't know how you move Mitch or Austin. You can't. They're top 10 players in the league. You can't move Tavares because there's a no move. Mm-hmm. So by process of elimination, and also we talked about his inconsistency, and this would pain me greatly to see Willie leave. But even though it is objectively illogical to trade him, the logical option of those four is him, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. When we look at William Nylander, he has the most movable contract. He's getting paid under 7. He's a winger with a no-move clause. A lot of teams are always in the market for a guy who can score 30 to play next to their franchise center, whoever that may be.
Yeah.
But when we look at who it should be, if you made me the GM for the day and said you need to trade one of these four, I mean, the only obvious answer is Jonathan Tavares.
Yeah,
there's a lot of no, you can't. There's assuming there was a no move clause. Obviously, assuming you can't assume that, but let's just say there was no move clause. There's been a lot of criticism that Jonathan Tavares is not worth the $11 million that he's currently making, and what I will say is he's probably not, but he's worth 9.5, 10.
Yeah, he's not worth like $6 million, like some people are saying. He's still almost a point a game.
He's a point a game. He's a great two-way scoring defensive, offensive player who's scoring at a 35 goal pace. Any player like that makes 9.5.
And it was on the open market too. People forget that sometimes when it's unrestricted free agents, they get more money than sometimes people think they're worth, but that's because there's competition. San Jose offered him $13 million. Imagine if he accepted that, how quote unquote overpaid he'd be.
He took a discount coming here.
What's that?
He took a discount coming here.
Yeah, exactly. And people don't necessarily think that that's a discount, but it was based on the other offers that he was getting. I'm not here for the Tavares slander that people are putting on him. I don't know how you can hate a guy who comes home as a captain, has been a great role model for some of the younger guys, who's been great in the media. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how you can hate on this guy, but you're right. If you had the power to like, I assume his no trade clause or no move clause doesn't exist. Yeah, he is the guy to move, but that shouldn't take away from that he's a great part of this team.
A lot of why John is worth $11 million is through intangibles. He's the quintessential example of a captain's captain, a leader's leader, the guy that everybody loves. And a great example I will give is for anybody who watched that Boston game. I think towards the end of the second period, Brad Marchand gave him an extremely dirty cross-check, a cheap shot.
Multiple.
Right? Jonathan Tavares, after the game, was asked about it. Now, before I give you John's answer, if this was Connor McDavid, he would have said, Brad Marchand's a dirty player, but don't worry, come playoff time, he'll get what he deserves. He probably would have been something like that. Connor McDavid is known to be very, very snappy and blunt in the media. Jonathan Tavares' example was so professional. When I heard it in the press game conference, I was in awe. First of all, he praised Brad Marchand. He said, look, me and Brad have played together for a very long time. That's part of his game. He makes a living out of it. He's very good at what he does. He's a fantastic scorer. But that's just part of his game. We know what we're doing in this organization. We think that we have what it takes to beat this team. He said something like that.
Yeah.
A guy who commands that respect. I don't care if he doesn't score 50. If he scores 35 and brings that level of leadership to a very young team, I'll pay him 12.
Yeah. Yeah, he's showed it time and again that he is mature. He definitely brings a calming aspect to the Leafs. And I think it's actually done a world of good for Matthews to not be the captain right away, because he can just focus on being Austin Matthews. He doesn't have to focus on being, I mean, he speaks after every game and he does a lot of the things that leader does because he is a leader on the team, but to not have that, even if it's just 10% more pressure, he's still a young guy. He's still 23, 24.
Yep.
Right?
I think that was the main reason why they didn't give him the captaincy. I mean, a lot of people might argue that
incident.
There was that incident that we won't go into, which definitely played a role.
Yeah, I think it was the right move at the time, considering it would have been terrible optically if they did that.
But I think in Kyle Dubas's mind, the overall plan was to always let Austin Matthews develop as a goal scorer, as a player, under the tutelage of experienced John Tavares. And one day, Austin Matthews will be the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
If he stays here, he will be.
At one point. I don't think they'll rip the C from Tavares like they've done 800 times in San Jose.
Yeah.
But at some point, Austin Matthews will be wearing the C, and he should.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the path that we're going down. I think that he will be. I hope he signs, and I hope he does wear the C at one point, but things are working out great the way they are. So we're talking about Johnny. We're talking about that second line. A guy that I'm really interested in talking about is Andre Kasha, who's hurt. He's probably going to come back for playoff time or just before, but there's going to be... He's making the lineup. I'm just... who comes out at that point? It's going to be someone from the fourth line. Engvall has to stay. So if he gets bumped down now, he's on the fourth line. We're talking about a fourth line now. Who do you think that fourth line is? Who do you think comes out of the lineup, and then how do the lines get a little reshuffled in your opinion?
First of all, this is a great problem to have.
Yeah. Oh, we haven't had this problem ever.
A great problem. As you alluded to, the answer, if Kasha had come back a game after when he got injured, the answer was Engvall. But Engvall has been probably the best Leaf away from Austin and Mitch.
He's been really
over
good.
The last recent stretch. He is extremely gritty. He is so quick. And one of the best parts about his game is that he offers such strength, that second penalty kill.
Yeah.
We saw what he did against Tampa when he made that crazy move, cut in and scored short side on Andrei Vasilevsky.
Mm-hmm.
That goal was beautiful. It seems like a lot of the reason why the Leafs special teams is so touted this year is because of the ability of that penalty kill to score.
Yeah, their penalty kill has been a big strength of theirs this year.
Not only do they stop goals on the power play, like over the last recent stretch, I think they have like 4 or 5 penalty kill goals.
I think they lead the league in shorties.
Without a doubt, they lead the league. Ilya Mikheyev might lead the NHL in shorthanded goals, and Engvall has scored a couple. You cannot take this guy out of the lineup. As a complete opposite to William Nylander that we just mentioned, Engvall looks like the guy who, when he stays off the score sheet, you notice him playing.
Yeah, and he hadn't been that way in the past. But when they signed him to that 2-year, $1.5 million contract just before COVID, and there were talks of waiving him, there were talks of burying him in the minors or scratching him, but now you can't take him out, and it's so nice to see that he's gotten better. Because he's always had the talent, like you said, he's a great skater. Him and Mikheyev on that line, they're so fast. When they played together before Kasha's injury, he's really good. If he's on your fourth line, it's a pretty deep team.
What I would do is, if I was Kyle Dubas, because the fourth line doesn't get as many minutes as you would like, especially within the playoffs, considering the way Engvall is playing now, I would slot Kasha on the fourth line when he comes back. I would keep Engvall on that third line because he's been so good. I would probably take Spezza out, keep Blackwell in the center because he's been great.
Really good.
On the penalty kill. Great 5-on-5. He's scoring. I would keep Engvall and Blackwell in the lineup all the time, and then I would shuffle out Simmons and Clifford on the left side.
He's been so good.
Yeah.
And he's actually something I've noticed. Usually big guys, they're not that fleet of foot because they're big. But he's actually a really good skater. He moves really well. I think if they can flop him and Simmons, they always have kind of one of those guys there just to, do their thing. I'm really excited for what this team will look like when they're all healthy.